Restaurants. So we mentioned this John Cass column yesterday, talking about the impact on the restaurant industry, hospitality industry, generally speaking, with the lockdown and bus policies advanced by our overlords, Pritzker and Lightfoot. The death of a dream is how it was characterized by a Chicago restaurateur, a successful Chicago restaurateur, now made his way out to the suburbs, Jimmy Banakis, who has the Juicy O restaurant on Finley Road in Downers Grove. You don't see the death of a dream. What you don't see in terms of impact of policy. You don't see the restaurant owner with their heart cut out, losing their home they put up for collateral and all their savings. You don't see that, or the marriage is broken under the stress. You don't see the guilt that comes with failure or depth of feeling for the employees and their kids that you've watched grow up all their lives and call you papuli, which is little grandfather in Greek. A good restaurant is a family, he went on to say, but most people who haven't spent years in a restaurant don't see that. And coming out of COVID-19, whenever we get off this merry-go-round of lockdown policies, one wonders how many dreams will have died, how many restaurants that we used to see we won't see. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid friend of John Cass, Jimmy Banakis. Jimmy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning. So, I mean, you have run big restaurants in the city. You're part of Let Us Entertain You group, as I understand it from John's column. And now you're out in the burbs doing your own thing. And so, I mean, you have some real breadth with respect to the restaurant industry in Chicago Metro. So, tell us from your perspective what's happening.
Well, I grew up during the Vietnam era. That's when I came of age. And I remember generals telling us at the time we had to burn down the village in order to save it. And I have to say, I feel like a lot of our leaders are without, they've been thrust into this situation, but I think they're taking the same tact, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, to put it in perspective, a year ago, the economy was roaring. We had low interest rates historically. Well, consumer confidence was at an all-time high, and most restaurateurs, the successful ones, were expanding cautiously, but they were expanding. And then we had COVID, which nobody expected, and especially people that extended themselves are really in trouble right now, unfortunately.
And I mean, is there any help at all from the government? I know they have these grants, but the small business owners I know have applied for those and they didn't get them. So then what do you do? I know people that are not paying they're not paying their rent to the landlord because they can't, because there's no money to do that. And this restaurant tax in Chicago doubles on January 4th.
Amy, we're going to have to dig ourselves out of this, just like we always do. Restaurateurs, the successful ones, the good ones, are problem solvers, and they always come up with systems. I mean, if you look at all the successful guys like Dick Portillo, he was like the Henry Ford of street food, and there's a lot of people like Ray Kroc. I mean, it was all about systems, solving problems, and I think we're going to dig ourselves out of this. There's going to be some bodies, laying on the road, but we'll dig ourselves out.
How many? I mean, what percentage of restaurants?
It's hard to say. I mean, here, tonight, for example, last year and historically is the busiest bar night of the year.
More
and
so
all the
than
bars are closed.
Amy knows that.
So, well, no, it's more busy than New Year's Eve, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, because everyone comes home from college.
Or Blackout Wednesday, right? Yeah.
And St. Patrick's Day. The next 6 weeks in the restaurant business account for 33% of the sales for the entire year. So we're all going to be dark, and you can't just turn the switch on, turn it off, look at a chart, turn on the switch. We have to solve the problem. We can't just burn the village down.
But the numbers aren't there. I mean, if you look at the county by county, the number one cause of spread, again, is nursing homes and assisted living centers. Restaurants in DuPage are 1.6 or 1.4% when they had the contact tracing.
You know what, Amy? I'll leave that to you. You're the pundit, I just flip pancakes for a living. But
Well,
and I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming Pritzker. I think he's the last guy. Personally, I'm not, because I don't think he signed up for this. I mean, this.
He's governor. He signed up for this. Are you kidding me? He can reverse this.
I don't. I think he thought it was going to be largely ceremonial or something.
Yeah, that may be true, but what happens when I win? Now what do I do?
Listen, there was a time when I was sitting next to this real wealthy guy at a dinner, and I don't mean rich. I mean, he was really wealthy, and I said, "What's it like? I mean, And he said, well, it's being able to buy yourself out of any aggravation or a mistake. That's the best thing about having this much money. And I'm sure that the governor is like that, but he's in a situation now where he can't get out of it, unfortunately. Right. He can't buy his way out.
But he can make the right decisions. I'm not settling for that.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy, I got to tell you, I mean, I think we have a problem in this city and state, generally speaking, which is why it's the worst governed city in America and the worst governed state in American history. And that is we sort of say, well, you didn't know. Yeah, I know it's a tough thing, and we'll muddle through. But the last thing we want to do is hold people actually in charge accountable. I mean, it seems like that's the first thing we should do, and we haven't done a very good job of it, which is maybe why we continue to get people who run for governor and become governor who think it's a ceremonial post rather than an executive one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that they keep promising us they're going to fix the problem. It never gets fixed. And I think if you had problem solvers in there, courageous people, they'd be able to do it. But again, I'm not blaming Pritzker. He seems like
he's very
deer
jolly.
in the headlights.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah, and sometimes I feel sorry for him. So your restaurant, though, are you keeping it open, or do you have tents or igloos out there at Juicio's?
No, I mean, I've seen now that people are building actual buildings
right.
outside of the restaurant.
Yep.
I mean,
they're building a restaurant outside the restaurant.
Yeah.
Right.
I hope, it's not even a restaurant. It's a cold, drafty, damp restaurant outside of the restaurant.
Of them. Some of them are nice, and they bring in those heaters that you see on the sidelines at NFL games. And it's no difference than if you're in that building.
If you're next to the heater, it's too damn hot. And if you're on the other side of the room, it's too cold. So I don't know. It's not the solution completely. I think we should be able to open up at 50%. The restaurant industry, outside of the healthcare industry, we're the industry that is most concerned with health, welfare, food safety, alcohol awareness. I mean, we know how to do things. We were keeping people safe. If during the summer, if it was a breeding ground for COVID, all our servers and busboys would be on ventilators, and they're not.
Nope.
So,
well, here's the other thing, too. I mean, the silliness of this all, I mean, this is almost like a Monty Python sketch. You can't be inside in the restaurant, but you can build a restaurant outside that essentially has the same functionality, except it's less effective and less enjoyable and less comfortable. So I'm sorry, what is the difference? What is the difference between me being inside in a heated restaurant and me being outside in a heated building outside the restaurant?
The difference is wonderfully piece of red snapper perfectly cooked inside or a cold, damp, and then broccoli outside.
All right, but it's a lot of one restaurant owner I know said, I can't spend $12,000 on 6 tables that I don't know are going to get filled because, when the gale force winds and the sleet and snow comes, no one's going to want to sit outside. So how many restaurants have closed? Last count I heard was 5,000 in the state of Illinois. Do you know? And have you talked to any of them?
I don't know. Oh, my God. I talk to people every day. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you one thing. It's a fraternity. The independent restaurants are a fraternity that are so supportive of each other. I mean, to a person, I could tell you all these people that are friends or acquaintances of mine that your listeners would know. And to a man, to a person, they're all we tell each other, like, if you need anything, call me. What can I do to help? I mean, such a supportive, great group of guys. And
talk to people about the ripple effect, too, when you're talking about, 25, 40, 50% of restaurants that are around Chicago Metro today not being around in 6 months or a year. What the ripple effect on suppliers and the rest of the ecosystem that supports restaurants?
It goes all the way down to the farmers, the guy who's making eggs. When you just come up and say shut down on Friday, what are you going to do with the 35 pounds of red snapper in your walk-in box? If you're a fish restaurant. And I mean, the ripple effect is amazing. And the effect on people, employees, people who depend on restaurants to eat. I know so many people that can't open a can of soup at home.
Dan
You're
Croft.
talking to one of them. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
He doesn't know where the kitchen is.
Yeah, without you, Jimmy, I'm lost. Is
Yeah,
basically
well, Jimmy,
it. I'm going to starve to
Hey,
death.
believe me.
Let's talk about that. So they did, because then you don't know what to order because you don't know what's coming around the bend next week or in 2 weeks.
I mean, that's the key point right there. You don't know what's happening tomorrow. And we're an industry that plans on the future. We look at the past and we plan on what we're going to do in the future. And it's agonizing, because I knew when this whole thing became political early in the summer that we were going to be the football, this industry.
Well, how did it become political? What was your aha moment where you realized, this is different?
When the one side started blaming the other side for how well they were handling the situation. And 25 years ago as a country, we would all pull together on something like this, not all politics, but something like this, and fought it together. This became, the main topic of the political season. And I knew people like us were going to be in trouble.
You and our kids.
I've been, Jimmy, I've been critical of the bigger players, the bigger restaurateurs and restaurant groups in Chicago, like your former employer, former partner, Let Us Entertain You, and the Melman family or Lombardo and Gibson's, because they have political clout, and they can do for the restaurant industry what a lot of the small one-off independent restaurants can't do. And, you mentioned the word courage earlier in the program earlier in the interview with respect to politicians. Well, that applies across the board, and I don't think that those individuals who have outsized influence as compared to the independents have exercised their influence, have shown the courage that they should show in these times. Is that unfair to them?
For a lot of the guys that I know, it's a little bit unfair because they're not politicians and they don't dwell in that world. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think they might, but they don't. They're wrapped up in what they do. A guy like Rich Hellman, for example, he's in love with what he does. He's so good at it.
Right.
And when you ask him to step out and do something else, I remember when I was working with him and he'd have to make a speech for an organization or something, and he just couldn't take doing that. I'd help him once in a while. I'd help him write the speech. And he was always much more comfortable just talking about restaurants and dealing with that. And he's just not that political, I know. But
yeah, I hear you. It's just one of those things. I mean, you've seen some letters that have been written to the mayor's office when she turned over the streets to the mob, essentially, from jewelers and from another concern that has a bunch of real estate in the city, the people that are not political either, that don't want to weigh into this stuff, but have felt compelled to. And you talk about what our country used to be, and sometimes the circumstances demand that you do something you're otherwise disinclined to do. And I just think that to people that have that sort of influence, that could really force some additional consideration than is otherwise being given from politicians, have an outsized duty to intervene.
Yeah, you might be right, but I think this whole thing is so overwhelming, and the rules keep changing, and it throws everybody for a loop.
Yeah, that's fair. I talked to John Taffer, who's a colorful guy, as I'm sure you know, a couple of weeks ago, and he said he was actually fairly sanguine about the restaurant and hospitality industry, talking about, if we get past this and vaccines distributed and so forth, he thinks there could be a real restaurant renaissance by the perhaps end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter next year. Now, that won't mean that there's not going to be a lot of waste, left in the wake. A lot of people who've lost their restaurants and businesses, and that's a terrible thing. But there can be there's opportunities, and there can be this renaissance. But he did say about Chicago, right after the second lockdown was reinstituted. He said, that is a tragic mistake. That is a terrible mistake that Chicago is making, because that is going to put Chicago, which of course is a great restaurant city, as everybody knows, really behind the learning curve and behind the recovery curve as compared to the rest of the nation.
You're right. And Chicago is an independent town for restaurants. I mean, even if you go to New York and you walk down the street, you'll see Pizza Huts and Olive Gardens and mixed in with everything else. Here, that doesn't exist. It's just independent restaurants in all the neighborhoods in River North. So that's going to have a big bearing on it.
He is Jimmy Banakis. He's the owner of Juicy O Restaurant in Downers Grove. Support Juicy O when it's open, as long as it can be open.
Is it a carry out, or what do you have?
And other restaurants, too. By the way,